Today we are looking at lesson 14, which is introduction to decimals. So we just finished our last section. We're starting kind of a new unit within chapter 1, and we're talking about decimals now. So it kind of relates because we were dealing with fractions recently, and a decimal is another way of representing a fractional part. So if we had half of something, we know you would use 1/2, meaning half. For a decimal, decimals also represent a part of a larger value. So I always think of money when I think of decimals. And so if I have part of a dollar, I know I've got like cents, right? Well, we use a decimal for that. So if it's, half of a dollar, it is 50 cents or 0.15. So fractions and decimals really go hand in hand, that a lot of fractions can be represented with a decimal. All right, so first off, I'll get my screen going here and my little marker. All right, so it says here that a decimal is another way to write a fraction. So they show you the fraction 17/100. It can be written as 0.17. So think of it as a dollar has 100 cents, like 100 pennies to make $1. And if you have 17 out of 100, it can be written as 17/100 or 17 cents for us, right? 0.17. There is such thing as a mixed decimal. A mixed decimal is a decimal that has a whole number or a number in front of the decimal, as well as the part behind the decimal. That's a mixed decimal, okay? And when the decimal point serves to separate the whole number portion from the decimal, the actual smaller portion. Now we're gonna have some fun learning to read these, okay? So it tells you here, when you get to the decimal point, I'm gonna mark this in here. I'm probably gonna also put this in your notes as well, that when you read a decimal, we say and or point, okay? Now this and is gonna be very important because we have, well, if you had me for a previous math class, I hopefully have drilled into you not to say and when you're reading a number. So for example, if we had the number 150, I wouldn't want you to say 150, okay? That would be wrong, because when you say and, it signifies time for a decimal. So it's just 150, not 150, okay? So again, a little side note there. Okay, let me get some notes going here. I meant to get that started earlier. So this is section 1.20. And it's our intro to decimals. All right. And so we know that for the most part, a fraction and a decimal are interchangeable, okay? So decimals are another way to write a fraction. My handwriting is so great on this screen. All right. And then our example for that was 17/100. It's kind of like 17 out of 100 pennies, which is the same as 0.17, okay? When we read it, again, point is what you can say for the decimal point or the word and. So another example, they've got, make a little note that you can say and or point when you read a decimal. Okay, a decimal number. An example would be, they have like 12 0.59, okay? You can either say, 12.59, or what we're gonna learn about today is the place value behind the decimals. Just like we know we have ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s in front of your decimal, there's similar format behind your decimal, okay? So this would be tens, hundreds. So this would be the number 12 and 59 hundredths. All right, and we're going to practice some of that today. So some key things to note. We notice the and for the decimal and this little THS on the end. So I mentioned that it has place value that's like in front of your decimal, like ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. Behind the decimal, or to the right of the decimal, first off, there is no ones place equivalent. The very first place behind the decimal, like right here, starts off with tenths. And it has that little THS on the end so that you know you're talking about the right side or behind the decimal. So tenths, hundreds, thousands, okay, all of them have a little lisp on the end. And you can see that up here in the chart on the page that they're showing you one digit behind or to the right of the decimal is the tenths. Looks like that 0.1 would be written as 1/10. 2 places after the decimal is the hundredths and would be read as 1/100th. Now this could have been a different number. It could have been a 2 or a 3. You would just say 3 hundredths, right? And it keeps going. Thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 millions. But noting that each of these all have behind them that little lisp all the way on down, okay? And the fact that they don't have a ones. The very first place starts off at tens. All right, so down here it says, they want you to notice that the name of the decimal depends on the number of digits in the decimal. So it really has nothing to do with the actual number itself. Like here we had 59. The number 59 didn't change. We still said 59, but we named it hundredths because that was the last spot that the number was sitting in. We didn't say anything about the tenths place because that wasn't the last number. It's wherever that last number is sitting. So because this was sitting in the hundredths place, we tacked on the word hundredths at the end. Okay. Let's see. The name of a decimal can be changed without changing the value by annexing. They like this word, annexing. Okay. Annexing means to add zeros to the end, or dropping, meaning take off zeros, okay? So by annexing zeros, you're just adding additional zeros. I don't know if you've ever heard of like another building that might be called like an annex. Like let's say we had an extra building that we use for school and the extra classrooms in, we might call it the Fairfield Academy Annex, okay? It's that extra space that we use. Same thing with our numbers here. You can annex zeros, add extra placeholders. All right, so down here, they want us to write the fractions as decimals. And I'll do a couple now and you'll do more during class. I don't know if I assigned evens or odds on the homework list, but we'll just do a couple. So to write this as a decimal, we're going to use the denominator to help us. Because it has a 10 on the bottom, it's telling me to put the 9 in the tenths place. We even read it like that. We're kind of used to putting that little lisp on the end when you read a fraction, like 9/10. We already say it. We just didn't notice it necessarily. That it means we're going to take the decimal right? And then the 9 is gonna go in the first position behind the decimal in the tens place, 9/10. Okay? It gets a little more interesting when they make them larger, like this number 5. They've got 631, but it's 10 thousandths. Okay? So I'll put my little decimal, I might be able to fit it on here. And what I tend to do is to kind of count out my places first and then fill in my number. Because this 1, the last digit, has to be the number in the 10 thousandths place. So let's count over. We've got tenths, hundreds, thousandths, 10 thousandths, okay? So those are my spaces, and now I'll write in my number. Well, since it's 631, I need 3 spaces with the 1 in the last spot. So 631, and I got this little empty space. All right, well, what do you think we're gonna put in the empty space? Gonna be a 0. We use lots of zeros for placeholders, no different here with decimals. So it'll be 0.0631. That's the same as saying 631 10 thousandths. Now what they're gonna do, they're gonna start giving us the number like this and then asking us to make it a fraction or read it, okay? For this one, I would just look at, tenths, hundreds, thousandths, 10 thousandths. That would tell me what to put in the denominator, 10,000. And then the number is 631 on the top, okay? So you'll have a chance to keep trying these ones out. Let me flip to the next page here and see if there was an additional portion to this. Yep, here we go. So they're asking us to circle the greater decimal in each pair after comparing. So in order for us to compare decimals, and I think they had a little something about that down here on the last page. To compare decimals, we need to have the same number of places behind the decimal. So that's where they annex an extra 0. So 3 places were behind this decimal. This one only had 2 places behind it. So they added an extra 0 to make it even. Well, now you can just look at the number. It's like having 843 compared to 850. And they're saying, okay, well, which one is bigger? 843 or 850? Well, we know 850 is bigger. So we would use this less than symbol to show that 843 is less than 850. All right, without the 0 on the back, it might make you think that this was the larger number, okay? But make them balanced, have the same number of places before you compare, all right? So let's see that on the next slide here. All right, so we've got 0.76 compared to 0.8. We could also read that as 76 hundredths compared to 8/10. To level the playing field, we got 0.76, then we've got 0.8. I've got 2 places here, so I need an extra place right there. So now I'm comparing 76 with 80. And it just says to circle the one that's greater. Well, now that they're the same number of places, I can see that this one is the larger one. Okay, I hope that's making sense. Like I said, we'll talk more during class if you're having trouble. Let me do another one. 0.075 compared to 0.0781. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3 here and 1, 2, 3, 4 there. So we'll add an extra 0, and now we'll compare. This 0 I'm going to ignore and just look at the 750 compared to 781. So 750, 781, 781 is bigger. All right. Let's drop down to another one down here. It says use words to write these decimals. So we know that I mentioned before that the decimal point is read as and. And then you'll read the place value of the number after you read the number. Let me see if they had a bigger one in the example. No, they didn't. Okay. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna make up one. They don't give us very many to practice up here, so I'm gonna make one up myself. Let's say that I had okay, and then this one I'll make up okay. So for this first one, the number in front of the decimal, we would just read that as regular 9. Okay, and then the decimal point would be and. Now I'm not going to write like all the words out. Technically, they want you to write 9 as N-I-N-E, but just for simplicity's sake, I'll just do a 9 today. 9 and okay. This number is 125. Notice that I'm not putting any kind of a THS, none of the lists. This number is 125 and it's behind the decimal. So I would still read this as regular 125, but the place value of the last number, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, would lead me to put thousandths on the end. Okay. So 9 and 125 thousandths. All right, maybe I shouldn't put the same number of places for this one. I probably should make it a little more interesting. Let's put an extra place in there. Okay, so now we have 8 and, so the number 8 and tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths. So 8 and 1, 10 thousandths. Okay. I got my THS, there we go. My handwriting is so lovely, I know. All righty, so not every decimal carries a number in the front. So for example, if we wanted to read this number here, where it just has a decimal point 0781, when we get ready to read it, we don't say and, okay? You could say point if you wanted to, 0.0781, but for this course, they're gonna ask us to, use the place value. So we would read this number here, which is 781, just because there's 3 numbers and it's 781, okay? 781, and let me write this one out. Because on your quizzes, they're going to ask you to write this out. I was just kind of conserving space. 7, well, there should be a space between those two. 781, 781, and then like I said, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths. 781, 10 thousandths. Move my. Okay. So again, no and, you just start right in. 781, 10 thousandths. All righty. And then they're going to give you the words and ask you to go back to the number. So if I had given you 781, 10 thousandths, then I'd start off with my 781. And then because it's 10 thousandths, I kind of count over, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, not enough, add a 0, and decimal point, okay? All right, so I'm gonna pause this video or stop this video here and I'll restart it to cover section 1.21.